of war and service members listed as missing in action long after the end of the Vietnam War. James Clapper has been there for all of it. He is a controversial figure in lots of different circles for lots of different reasons, because he's been at least tangentially, and in many cases, centrally involved in just about every intelligence story that has made the news in the past 40 years. And intelligence issues rarely become national news stories because they're such good news. It's almost always when something's gone bad. But in this new book, James Clapper is scathing about President Trump, which is remarkable itself, coming from a career, nonpartisan military and intel guy who has served under every president since John F. Kennedy. But listen to this. This comes right at the end of the book. The last giant intelligence story and scandal that Clapper was right in the middle of things for was obviously the Russian attack on the 2016 election. You heard me read the part where he explains that's part of why he decided he was going to write a book. The book explains in great detail what the intelligence community knew about the Russian attack, how they responded, what decisions were made while the attack was underway, while President Obama was still president. Again, Clapper left the job of National Intelligence Director on the day of Trump's inauguration. In the intelligence community assessment that Clapper released in January before Trump was inaugurated, you'll remember that the intelligence community announced its conclusion that Russia had attacked the presidential election specifically to try to help Donald Trump win, but the intelligence community didn't try to assess whether or not the Russian attack worked, whether they actually succeeded in giving Trump the win when he otherwise would have lost. That was where the intelligence community's official assessment left off in January of 2017, just as James Clapper was leaving office after decades in intel. Well, now that he's out of government service and a private citizen, James Clapper is ready to say what he really thinks on that front and what he really saw happen. Okay, check this out. By May 2017, when James Comey was fired as FBI director, we had learned that the Russian operation had been even more expansive than the intelligence community had assessed in January. We knew now that the Russians had thousands of Twitter accounts and tens of thousands of bots that posted more than 1 million tweets. They posted more than 1,000 videos on YouTube with days of streaming content. Facebook has said Russian contact reached 126 million of its American users, which is an astonishing number considering that only 139 million Americans voted. As the leader of the intelligence community, I testified that the IC did not attempt to assess whether the Russian influence campaign impacted the results of the election. As a private citizen, I have no doubt they influenced at least some voters. Looking at the savvy ways the Russians targeted specific voter groups, for instance, buying ads on Facebook promoting Clinton's support of the Black Lives Matter movement, but ensuring those ads ran only on the pages of white conservative voters in swing states. Looking at how they created lies that helped Trump and hurt Clinton and promoted these falsehoods through social media and state-sponsored channels to the point that the traditional U.S. media were unwittingly spreading Russian propaganda. Looking at how they ran a multifaceted campaign and sustained it at a high level from early 2015 until Election Day in 2016, Clapper concludes, of course the Russian effort affected the outcome of the election. Surprising even themselves, they swung the election to a Trump win. To conclude otherwise stretches logic, common sense, and credulity to the breaking point. Less than 80,000 votes in 3 key states swung the election. I have no doubt that more votes than that were influenced by this massive effort by the Russians. The immediate past director of national intelligence, who was director of national intelligence during the Russian attack on the election, says he has no doubt that the Russian attack, in his words, quote, swung the election to a Trump win. That means that the immediate past director of national intelligence believes that Donald Trump is only president because of a successful foreign intelligence operation to make him president. And as to the question of whether or not the president's campaign benefited from that operation just by dumb luck, or whether they were in on it in some way, here's what James Clapper says now in this book that is just out tonight. Quote, as the investigations have advanced, the specter of collusion has dominated the discussion. When I left office on January 20th, 2017, I'd seen no smoking gun evidence that the Russian government and the Trump campaign were in substantive coordination of their efforts. I didn't learn about the June 9, 2016 Trump Tower meeting between Trump's closest advisors and representatives of the Russian government, purportedly to discuss dirt on Hillary and sanctions against wealthy Russians. I didn't learn about that until I was firmly retired. But what I did see as DNI is that the Russians and the campaign seem to employ strikingly parallel messaging in social media posts and public statements, effectively complementing each other to great effect with no attempt to hide it. That combined effort appeared to go well beyond candidate Trump's calling on a foreign power to find 30,000 missing emails belonging to his political opponent, or his praise for WikiLeaks for publishing materials Russian intelligence had stolen. On a routine basis, whenever the campaign published an allegation that hurt Clinton, the Russians would repeat, amplify, and embellish that claim. And when the Russians promulgated a conspiracy theory about her, Trump would repeat it at campaign rallies and on Twitter. Whether secretly coordinated or not, whether there was actual collusion or not, this parallelism constituted a putative team effort by the Russian government and the Trump campaign. He served as Director of National Intelligence for 6.5 years, including for the duration of the Russian attack on the 2016 election. He says in this new book just out today that the Russian attack did sway the election, that Donald Trump would not be president but for that attack. And he says the Trump campaign helped in the attack. He calls it a putative team effort.